Well, welcome to Chapter 8 on memory for Psych 150. Um, as many of this stuff, to me, it's all real interesting because it ties so much into who we are and what we do. Um, this is one of those that really, I think, talks to the student a lot because it's a little bit it's a little bit tied into the learning aspect as well. So let's go through this. And again, if you have any questions or comments or any clarifications, send me an email, send me a remind, or let's set up a time to talk via Zoom. Okay, we can do that, and not a problem. Okay. So the first slide here is just an overview of what we do. So how do we process and store information? Kind of interesting, and different types of memory, how we retrieve memories, and why do we forget? There's also a misinformation aspect here too of why information gets shared that's not accurate, not necessarily on purpose, but it's not accurate. So anyway, let's get into this. Here's the basic idea is something comes in via a sense like a sight, smell, touch, and what we do is we encode it. We say what that is. So we hear a dog bark and we hear the noise. We don't see a dog, we hear the noise, but we can encode that as a barking dog. Okay, and that's what comes into us from our auditory senses. And then what happens is that goes into storage. Within storage, it interacts with everything else like memories and um, just other aspects of it, our fears, our feelings, ties in with that. So a dog barking may be really scary. A dog barking could be really happy. A dog barking could be something where we got to feed it. All of those things take place in storage. And then it gets stored in a certain spot, usually with a combination of many other components of sensory perception, okay? And even feelings and cognitive perception. So now we've got a dog barking, and let's say we're kind of friendly, we like dogs, and we're in that. So next time we hear that bark, we go into our storage and we say, okay, well, that bark sounds similar to this one, okay? That's our dog, and our dog is barking because they're hungry, okay? And we love our dog, so it's a good feeling. All of that's tied into here, and then we retrieve it and say, dog's hungry, I'm gonna go get some information for him. That's how our memory works. Basic ideas. Encoding comes in, storage is where it combines with all the other information in our brain. It's miraculous how our brain operates, and then retrieval is how that comes out at the end for use. Okay, that's basically what we're going to be covering. So encoding labels it. It's we're driving, we can see things, we can hear things, we can feel things. We can feel the road, we can feel those bumps on the side if we're going off, or things like that. And it's part of automatic processing. Sometimes we can drive to school or to work, or we can go somewhere, and without even thinking about it. Sometimes you can drive to work and you don't even remember doing it, and that's processed in our memory. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Efforting is like studying for something, being effortful. You have to go down and force yourself to try to remember those things. And so that's kind of effortful and automatic. Automatic are just things that happen, and effortful, we got to make an effort, as it says. Okay, a couple basic types of encoding. Your type of encoding, auditory. Okay, visual is things we see. Okay, and acoustic is the things we hear. Those are three main areas. Okay, of a coding coming in. Could also be touch in there as well. But most of it involves the senses, and these three are the primary ones that go in there. And so this is self-reference effect. This means that if something relates to us, like if psychology is something you're interested in and want to be a psychologist, or even a major in psychology, or you know, to field like any health profession involves amount of psychology, it's going to mean more to you than someone who's going to go and become an engineer, or someone who's not sure what they want to do, and they're going to go off maybe and start their own business in construction or landscaping or something like that. So self-reference, if it means more to you, you'll remember it better. Okay, you'll code it more say deeply. Okay. Um, here's kind of an elaborate model of what I've just said. You've got your central executive, which is kind of your brain is doing stuff, going on. And see all these arrows. It shows the complexity of what's going on. And so we have something that is our visuospatial, which is kind of visio would mean our visual. Okay, we've got auditory thing going on here, the loop going on, capturing information constantly, capturing images constantly. And this is something, that episodic buffer, this is how it ties into what these things mean. Okay. How does our sight match with our sound and the episode of what's going on? So we hear a dog, we see a dog, and then and somewhere we've identified a dog, and our central executive says, that's a dog, and it's one that we know that wants food. And that those kind of things start going into your long-term memory after they happen more and more and work their way through short-term memory. Okay, so this is kind of process a little more elaborate of what we just talked about, and it's called the Bradley Hutch model. Okay, so sensory input. This is kind of short-term, long-term kind of aspect. We have something come in, okay, sensory input, some sense, okay, we've talked about that a little bit. Again, this is Atkinson-Shiffrin model of memory, sensory memory. And if it's not consequential, okay, it just lost. It goes away, and it doesn't even really make it to short-term memory. So something comes in, and one tree is greener than another. We kind of notice it, but we don't really care about it. It kind of goes away. Okay. Then, if it is important to us, if we happen to be a horticulturist or something, that may be something that's important, and it goes into our short-term memory. We start looking around for things that are the same color, different colors. Rehearsal, different colors start going around. We start categorizing things, okay? And then we play with it a little bit, and if we find out this isn't really valuable, it gets lost. This is in short-term memory. Eventually, if we deal with it enough touches, as I've said, sometimes in the content of the class, it goes to long-term memory. Okay, so a lot of people that begin kind of a college career in coursework, they kind of think, well, I'll just study for the night before, and I'll do well on the test, and it commits to long-term memory. So I'll take a Thursday night and study for it. I'll do the quiz on Friday morning, and everything will be okay. It might work for you. I'm not saying it won't work. It won't work consistently for you, or even when you get into more elaborate ideas. You have to kind of deal with information. You have to rehearse it. You have to go through the homework assignments. And I'm not talking about psychology here. The homework assignments. You have to do whatever, there's a journal, or write the papers, or watch the videos. And the more you touch that material, the more it becomes rehearsed, and the more it moves to long-term memory. Okay? So this is kind of the idea of you're studying, you go through some stuff, you have information in the chapter doesn't really mean a whole lot, and you find something that's interesting, you start rehearsing it, and then it goes to long-term memory because you've rehearsed it enough. Okay? So that's kind of the idea with that. And sensory memory, these are just when you remember stuff. They're only stored for a couple of seconds unless you really have an impact on a smell, and how often have we had a smell and all of a sudden it takes us back to about a deja vu moment, and that we'll talk about in a little bit too, because that's somewhere in your memory, but you haven't dealt with it in a long time. So this is the Stroop effect. Let me see if we have, I don't have the video here lined up, but there's a video you can see. And what the Stroop effect does, how many of you, just think about this yourself, can read these words and can say the words and not the color? So you would say red, blue, yellow instead of, and some of you might say, and there's a video game to play where it goes really fast, where this is what's called, this is a memory thing, but it's also a processing thing, and how our sensory memory takes into account of what, do we see the words first and the color second? Okay, I'm sorry, we see the color first and the word second. So we generally, the first thing that registers is the color, and we have to think about it a little bit and process it and say red. Okay, and so that's something that's part of the Stroop effect, which is, like I said, in the videos, there's kind of stuff that's going on with that. Um, Short-term memory and the movie Dora. There's also a little Dora clip about Dora and how she remembers something for just a short period of time, and she's swimming along with Nemo's dad and trying to find the boat that was up there, and also they're swimming along, and she goes, "Who are you?" And they've been swimming for an hour. So usually short-term memory lasts about 20 seconds. So you're reading something for a class, and you're kind of losing that memory, losing that focus, and you kind of read through a couple of pages and not have remember anything you just read. Most of it because that time has just elapsed. You didn't address it. You didn't. I'm not saying rehearse it, but you didn't give it attention, as it said in the earlier thing. Okay. Usually we can remember about 7 items. What's funny is that phone numbers, before area code became so important, previous to cell phones, you just had to give people your last 7 numbers. If you lived in this area and you were 910, we're in Moore County, Hope County, 910, all you had to give people is your last 7 numbers. They knew you were 910. I lived in LA, and there were 2 numbers in all of really Southern California. It was 805 and 213. And if you told someone, if we lived in our area, it was 805, all you had to give them was your last 7 numbers. So there must have been somebody that designed something that said 7 numbers you can remember pretty well. Beyond that, it gets out of it kind of gets out of sequence a little bit. Okay, so when we transfer things, usually they're encoded, they're to something, and they become what's called memory consolidation. So we have a visual, we have a sound, and we have a touch. We've petted a dog, we've heard it bark. Put those things together, we say, okay, that's a dog. Okay, and rehearsal is conscious repetition. Okay, so that's going over and over information. Many of us have done that, or we try to remember a number. We've said it over and over again in our brains, and to try to remember it. Again, that will last about this long. Okay, but it might be long enough for you to get that number into your cell phone or whatever from there. Okay, so long-term memory is a little more complex. There are 2 aspects. This is a hint because it's on the quiz. There are 2 aspects of long-term memory. There's explicit and implicit. Explicit more is episodic, which means you've experienced something. It goes to long-term memory. Semantic is you've kind of, it's knowledge and concept. This is what you've studied. Okay, this is where you've gone and you learned some knowledge and concept. This is more about you just experience. You watched a video. Okay, could be auditory, visual as well. But there's explicit and implicit. Implicit now is more procedural. These are things you've learned: how to drive a car. Okay, how to open your house with a key, how to use your cell phone, how to type with your thumbs. That's all part of implicit memory. Emotional conditioning are things that have happened where you hear that dog bark, and you had a dog bite you when you were young, and all of a sudden this fear aspect comes over you. That's just implicit memory that's tied into emotional conditioning. Okay, so long-term memory has explicit and implicit, and it's divided in these 4 categories below. Okay, so this is just going through the same thing I pretty much just talked about. You can go through these on your own time, but they're kind of what we just talked about going forward. So there's a lot of slides here. I don't want to spend all the time on that. So implicit, riding a bike, driving a car, you can see those kinds of things as well. From behaviors, processes, and procedures. Retrieval, there's recall, there's re-recognition and relearning. Recall is when you're able to just bring something up. You use that for an essay test. Okay. Recognition means that you have multiple choice and you're just able to recognize which one. You kind of have an idea what the answer is. Recall, you have to write it out because you have to know what it is. Multiple choice test, you kind of have an idea and you answer what you think is the best choice. Okay. Relearning happens a lot. I'll use Spanish in high school for my example. I took 2 years of Spanish in high school. That was in 1970 and 1971. That's a long time ago. But there are sometimes things can happen that will pop into my brain that I remember from that time. Okay. Also, a little bit of Spanish that I remember really was learned in that time, and it pops in. But if I don't again listen to it for a long time, if I'm in a place where Spanish is being spoken and someone's helping me, I can kind of follow along a little bit. Okay, but if no one's helping me and people are just talking, I am lost. Okay, So anyway, but you relearn it. Basically, you've learned it before, and something comes back and triggers it. Kind of that smell thing that's there. It's the smell happens, and you all of a sudden it brings you back to some time, grandma's kitchen or something like that when you're a little kid. So parts of the brain that are involved, primarily, let's go to the next page here a little bit. It's a little better. I think this is the page, yeah. Primarily is your prefrontal cortex, okay, which is also where a lot of your executive center is, okay. This is where your, those of you, and we haven't talked about it much so far, that make decisions, this is where your prefrontal cortex is, and this is where decisions are made. This is where your ego sits. When we talked about id ego and superego, this is where it sits, where you kind of do the risk aversion and you decide to do something. This is where when mom or dad ask you, or somebody asks you, why'd you do that? And your prefrontal cortex is not completely formed, doesn't get completely formed until probably your early 20s. And you say, I don't know. And you're probably telling the truth, but parents get upset about that because, oh, of course you know. Sometimes it just seemed like a good thing to do at the time. Because you didn't really do a risk assessment and you didn't decide not to do it. Okay. Here's some other places where your amygdala, hippocampus, and your cerebellum occur. This is kind of in your what was called your primitive brain area. These are where things happen in terms of feelings and emotions and certain enzymes and what else I'm looking for? Chemicals are released, neurotransmitters are released that do fight or flight, those kind of things that occur. Okay, and this is the cerebellum as part of the processing thing. But this is where a lot of your memory stuff occurs. Okay, and it ties to you have your Wernicke area, you have your motor cortex coming across here, and all those kind of things are feeding information to your prefrontal cortex, and it's kind of making those decisions based on your senses and your coding process. So here it talks about those things, kind of what, yeah. And what they used to do back where they found this stuff out is that, I know this is the patient here, but what they would do is they would cut out parts of the brain, like the amygdala, back in early, like maybe 18th century, 19th century. They cut out parts of the brain and see how you responded to memory. This is your explicit memory in your hippocampus, memory of fears, and these are kind of emotional things that are going on. So if your emotions went away and your amygdala was taken out, then they felt that was part of it. Nowadays, they do more of those CTEs and things like that will determine where neurotransmitters are firing, neurons are firing, and the more they're firing when you're trying to deal with fear and fear memories, they'll know that that's the amygdala that is taking place. Okay. Cerebellum, prefrontal cortex, kind of same thing. So neurotransmitters, these are the chemicals that are in your brain that sit at the end of the nerves that go in that what's called a synaptic cleft, which is the distance between one nerve cell and the other, which is very, very small. And they give off these chemicals which pass along. These are the chemicals that are also used when they're trying to control depression, anxiety, sometimes ADHD, ADD. There's something in a medicine that either enhances these or reduces these, and it kind of creates that process of these neurotransmitters. Okay, so the arousal theory: if something gets you, let's say you go through a car accident, and it was just one of the most terrifying things you've ever been through. That will be an emotion that will stay with you a long time. Matter of fact, it might even be traumatic. It might even stay with you the rest of your life. Okay, could be those flashbulb memories, something that many people in my generation, 9/11, or I'm going way back, President Kennedy was shot and killed, an assassination. Those are things that people remember where you were when you heard them. You guys probably have things that are in your life that's been that way. Those flashbulb memories. Sometimes they are visual. See the picture of the planes flying into the World Trade Center was a flashbulb memory that most people that were alive during that time, probably middle school on up, will remember that for the rest of their life. Okay, so think about what are the ones that you have in your life that are those things that have happened. It could be personal as well. those kind of things. And they could be really positive memories. It could be your third birthday, or when you received some gift that you were just absolutely incredible. Okay, so anyway, that's the arousal theory. The more aroused you are during a memory, the more you will remember it. Here's the flashbulb of the World Trade Center. The planes flew in here, and most of you weren't alive when that happened, but that was a horrible time for our country. A horrible time and a great time. A great time was that people came together more than I've ever seen them. People were giving blood. They were lined up 300 or 400 people deep to give blood to help people. Walking down the street, there were people would, how you doing today, and talk about what, it was just a great time to see that. It's just too bad it took something like this to happen to make that feeling happen. Anyway, another little aside there. Amnesia, two types of amnesia: retrograde and anterograde. Retrograde, retro, think of past. Okay, it's if an event happens and you can't remember anything before that. Okay, or an event happens and you can't remember anything from in front of that. So let's say an event of some trauma of a car accident. A car accident, you can remember everything before, all the way up to the actual collision, but you can't remember what happened after, who got hurt, who didn't get hurt, until maybe a couple hours later, when you all of a sudden felt like you woke up and you were somewhere else. You were at home, you were in a hospital or something like that. So that's retro and anterior. Okay, so those are two to kind of remember a little bit with that. So memory construction. So the formation of new memories, we've talked about that a little bit. And reconstruction is bringing up old memories. That's kind of that smell idea. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Suggestibility is when people can remember something. So how many of us have something in our past where our parents or somebody said, well, remember when that happened when you were 2? You don't really remember things at 2. I mean, very few people remember that what happened at 2. But they tell you that story enough, and all of a sudden it becomes a memory, or you think it's a memory. That's a suggestibility. The misidentification effect occurs in trials. People get convicted of murder because of suggestibility that occurs in juries. Okay, so that are not innocent people get convicted of murder, I guess. So we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But suggestibility is when something happens that people are talking about it a lot, and all of a sudden yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, she was wearing a red coat, and you look back at the video, and the person was wearing a white coat. But other people told you, well, I saw a red coat. Anyway, another whole story there. Here's eyewitness and metacase. This is kind of what I said. There's Elizabeth Loftus. There's a video in this thing that talks about this idea. So what the video, one of the videos kind of said, I think I have this one. I'm not sure if it's up there or not, but there is a park situation where there's a bunch of people gathered around kind of a sidewalk vendor. Okay, and all of a sudden, right near them, a woman's walking along, and a guy comes up and accosts her and starts screaming at her, and then grabs her purse, okay, and holds it behind his back, and someone comes along and grabs it and runs away. Okay, now there's 20, 30 people standing there watching this. Okay, they had this mock detective pulls them aside, and the whole thing was planned, but the mock detective pulls them aside and asks them questions. Okay, what was the person wearing? How tall were they? How short were they? Was it a male, female? How many people involved? All those kind of questions. And it is phenomenal how many people give different information. And that coat thing I talked about, there are people that swore she had a white coat. People that swore she had a red coat. She had a gray coat. People swore that there were only two people involved, and yet there was another person very definitely that walked up and grabbed, the person grabbed the woman's purse, and then he held it out, and the person ran by and grabbed it. So they must have been working together in this scenario. And people swore up and down it was that. Well, the guy also dropped the purse. Okay, and somebody asked them in suggestibility. He said, well, did you see the camera he dropped? There was no camera to be dropped. And the people said, yeah, I saw the camera. And all of a sudden, from that point on, the person thought there was a camera. Okay, so these kinds of things occur in trials all the time. And one of the worst things that we use for trial, let's say, facts, so to speak, are eyewitnesses. Eyewitnesses are the worst thing to use. And so here's a little chart showing percentage of people that have been wrongful convictions and were released off of DNA, and over 70% of them that were released because of DNA were convicted based on eyewitness testimony. Forensic science could be that there's a hair recovered there, a piece of their coat, something like that. False confession, the foreperson was forced to do it, and informant, somebody came up and said, no, that person did it. So that's the least amount. But anyway, it's interesting. If you watch that Loftus video, it's kind of interesting. And even in videos today, because you guys know how well people can change videos, can do the editing on those, and how good people are at doing that. And you see it right now in some of our political ads that are occurring, as well as TV is exactly what happens constantly. Occasionally you find a mistake where something happens and they were not in the same spots or whatever. But anyway, so that identification. So the struggles of juries is just impossible in these days, because they really have to do a gut level check on that, and they try to, and that ties into their emotions, their memories, their, so on and so forth. So anyway, misidentification occurs all the time, and it's constant. So when your friend says, "No, I know that happened, I saw it," they may be 100% correct, or they may be 100% wrong. They're probably somewhere in the middle. Okay. So anyway, I'm not saying that to don't trust your friends. I'm just saying that just to be a critical thinker. Be a critical thinker. Okay. So here's Loftus, and here's just one of the studies she did. She also did one too here of cars. So what she did is this is the suggestibility. She showed this picture, and she said that a collision occurred. No, she said, what was the speed when the person smashed into the other one? Okay, people guessed 41, 42%. What was the speed when the person collided? A little bit softer word. Now people had a little bit, speed was lower. All the way down to contact. Contact is like a little bump, right? So now the estimated speed was in the low 30s. So it's 10 miles per hour difference, which would cause a lot of damage. If you would even put, less impactful wording in there, you would probably even drop smaller. Okay, so this is the idea of suggestibility, and these are what trial lawyers do. So did you see so and so stab so and so in the back and 20 times? Well, all that data is going to suggest to the person that it actually happened, and they're going to say, well, yeah, I saw it. When yet really they may have heard something, they may have seen a shadow, but they didn't quite see the event. Okay, so anyway, so that's Loftus' study, interesting thing, and she does a couple things with that as well. So repressed and recovered memories. This ties a little bit into our wild child Jeannie. Imagine the field day psychologists would have of her. Eventually, I don't think they ever really did, because mom was crazy, and that was just a horrific story. By the way, critical period was the main word in there I was looking for. That was tied into the language. So anyway, but that's a little bit aside. Repressed memories. This is more of a Freudian aspect. He tries to use the Rorschach test or other things to bring out memories that you're really not thinking about. These are things that happen where you could have been abused as a child, and you just don't want to think about it anymore. So all of a sudden, it's kind of gone until it isn't, and then it's there. Or you're always scared of something, like dogs. You were bit when you were, like, let's say 3 months, and you don't remember it, and you're scared of dogs now. I don't like dogs today, but if you're scared of dogs, you have no idea it was there, and finally someone talks to you about being bitten by a dog, and then maybe the memory does actually come back to you. I don't, maybe it doesn't. Maybe a little older, maybe 2 or 3. Anyway, those are repressed memories and false memory syndrome. And this is where your parents would tell you something where it's remember when you were 2 and you did that thing with the birthday cake? It may or may not have happened. It may have been another setting. It may have been you're 8 or something. I don't know. Anyway, repressed or recovered memories. Why do we forget? Okay, because sometimes it's just not important. Okay, so which of these is a correct nickel? Okay, which one's a correct nickel? You probably, or the coin, you probably could rule out some of them. This one looks really funny. Okay, I tend to think that the guy's guys, as it says, this is me, Anthony, are tend to looking this way, not this way. I don't know. That's just kind of, so maybe it is or isn't. Usually, I remember the date being below, the one of the coinages here, but it could be wrong. So if I were to look at this, not really knowing exactly, I'd probably say C. Okay, but I wouldn't know for sure because it's never really been important for me to really look at that stuff. Okay, although I did a coin collection when I was little, but that was a long time ago. Okay, so anyway, you can figure that out. I'm not sure exactly what it is. So there's another video on there of Schachter and his 7 sins of memory. Uh, these are different types of memory. So he has 3 different types: forgetting, distortion, and intrusion. Okay, forgetting is like it decreases over time. It just goes away. Okay, absent-mindedness. So it's kind of some people just don't pay attention to a lot of things, and they forget because it just wasn't important to them. Okay, so that's kind of absent-mindedness. None of these are bad things. All of us get them all the time. And blocking. This is when we have that. I was going to say tip of the tongue, but I couldn't remember what that was. So tip of the tongue thing where we can't remember what that word is. We can't remember what that phrase is that we want to use. And we know it's there. We've used it a million times, and for some reason it gets blocked. Just you never know why. And there's some certain chemical reason that's occurring that's happening, but again, these don't mean you're crazy, they don't mean anything's wrong with you, there's things that happen. Distortion is when we misattribute a memory. We get, in our coding process, gets confused, okay? Suggestibility means that people have given us a false memory that we kind of tie into and say it's mine. A bias, this is when we look at, I'll get a little bit political here, but depending on your political bias, you look at the protests/riots that have been occurring in our cities for the last 6 months or so, depending on your political bent. Okay, if you tend to be more on the conservative side, you will call them riots. If you tend to be more on the liberal side, you'll call them protests. Now they really are, in reality, they're a combination of both. Okay, there are people that are rioting if they fit in. I don't know. There are people that are just protesting. Okay, but depending on your bias, your memory will be, oh, it's all these riots are occurring, or all these protests are occurring. That's kind of the bias that's there. I'm sorry for getting a little too political. I'll try to keep it as even keel as I can. So anyway, intrusion type. This is where we are not able to. Something keeps popping in your brain, and we're just not able to let it go. Okay, so it keeps intruding on our memory. So those are Schachter's 7 sins, and he has a nice little video. Most of the videos there are fairly short, and so he talks about those a little bit as well. So this is the decay of memory. 100% at the time. 31 days later, you have about maybe 11% of that memory you're able to bring back. Okay, and this would depend on how much you rehearsed it. It could stay at this level if you're rehearsing all the time, or it could drop down even maybe lower this if you just absolutely never just approaches your mind. Okay, but this is the transient or storage decay of memory. And the bias, here's the bias here. So gender biases, those occur all the time. Yeah, I thought she was wearing a dress because girls wear dresses. Okay, not today, but certainly years ago, that's all they wore. When I went to elementary school, the girls had to wear dresses. Or other gender issues. It used to be that long hair meant it was a woman. Well, that's not necessarily the case today. So anyway, those are something. Racial, certainly things about race that occur. What was the color of the person that you saw running from the store with the stuff? Oh, it was a darker color, and yet it might have been a blonde surfer. Okay, but because of your stereotypical biases, you'll tend to, you didn't say it was a black person or an African American person, but you tend to see a darker complexion based on your biases. Egocentric, some other things that involve your past, and hindsight. We tend to think we knew it all along. This happens a lot with a lot of people who just don't like to be wrong. They have this hindsight bias that they really struggle with. Okay, so anyway, persistence. So if you want to recall something, you really have to deal with it. This ties into a little bit about PTSD Imagine a soldier carrying his buddy or her buddy or her friend, who's a buddy generally is a male term, but her friend off the battlefield who is injured. That's a memory you probably won't forget because it'll continue to come up when you see that person again or whenever. Okay, so this was an Air Force training video, I think. So here's interference. So here's the thing. So if you guys don't have lockers, high schools don't have lockers too much anymore. Colleges have lockers, but you may have something that you had in your high school locker. So here's your locker number, right? And now you get a new one. Okay, you have trouble remembering your new one. It could be a phone number. It could be an address. That's proactive interference because a new one goes back and interferes with the old one. Okay, interferes with the old one. Retroactive means that you can't remember the old one because you only remember the new one. Okay, so until you remember the new one, you can't remember the other one. Okay, so interference back and forth, and either one can happen at any time, anybody. Rehearsal, okay, is a way, and this is the touch points I talked to you about. Chunking. How many of us do chunking? Like our Social Security numbers. They're 3, 2, and 3. Okay. Other numbers, our credit card numbers are 4, 4, 4, and 4. Okay. They try to make it easier for us to remember numbers, although we don't memorize our credit card numbers. But chunking, mnemonics down here. Mnemonics. I use mnemonics all the time. I can remember when I was little, 5th grade, 6th grade, I think. I went to Catholic school in Sister Mary Adelaide. I remember very well. Taught us that the scales are every good boy does fine. Or FACE, F-A-C-E. Those are the spaces. Every good boy does fine are the lines. I'm not a musician at all, but I can remember those from my 5th grade, which occurred in 1965, which is a long time ago. Anyway, that's my mnemonics. Elaborate rehearsal. This could be study cards. This could be Quizlet. This could be meeting with a group of friends and having a conversation about psychology. Just different ways that you try to relate to the topics. But all of these involve ways of touch points of the data. And the more you touch the data, the more it moves from short-term to long-term memory. Okay, and the more you get into long-term memory, the better you'll do on the tests. Okay, even at the point where we do here is hopefully you learn where the stuff is, or you get an approximate idea of where it is. You maybe go over the PowerPoint or some other things, and when you go to sit down and take the test, you got all your tools laid out, and you can kind of rip through the test. Some of you have taken the test in as low as like 22 minutes, I think, with somebody, and they got like a 95 on it or something. I mean, they really do their stuff. Others might take an hour or so and do fine as well. A lot of that is just the process you set up ahead of time. Okay, so chunking. Even when you're creating your mnemonic devices, you're actually touching, and so you're learning it by creating the mnemonic devices. Okay. There's the mnemonic. So how many of you have learned your months based on this? That your knuckles are the 31s, and the ones in the middle are less than. Okay. Mostly 30, except for February's 28. Okay, so some learn it that way. Others learn it by the little song. Okay, but we have things like that we've learned over time. That's a mnemonic that's been out there for a long time, and it's a study. Rehearsal. Again, these are all about touch points. How does it relate to you? I mean, psychology should be easy because all this has a self-reference. All is about you. Forgetting curve. You can't study early and forget it. You got to keep going back. Touch points. Rehearse. Touch points. Look out for interference. Look out things that occur that kind of make it difficult for you. Sometimes people need to move. There's people that do better when they're walking and studying. Others, maybe you're tapping your foot or something. Sleep is real important. I'm gonna stay up all night and study. That's not a real good idea. You're better off studying early, getting a good night's sleep, getting up, and maybe doing looking at the stuff and moving on. Use mnemonic devices. Most all of this is about touch points. Probably 5 of the 7 is about touch points, and others are about more physical things that are going on. So touch points are critical. Okay. Okay, so that's it with chapter 8. hopefully you've gotten something out of it. I will post this, and you'll get a chance to look at it. If you have questions, comments, you want to talk about something on here, we can Zoom, you can send an email, or you can send me a reminder. I'll be happy to help you. Okay. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.